Welcome to the Bernie's Bootlegs podcast, where we explore the stories of successful musicians and share their perspectives on being an artist in a digital age. I'm your host, Kenny McCabe, and let's get into the show. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by you. If you would like to support the show, head over to berniesbootlegs.com/support. Every contribution will go towards the production costs and overhead of running the podcast. Your support is greatly appreciated and will ensure I can keep making episodes into the future. Thanks everybody and enjoy the show. In today's episode, we're speaking with bassist Raviv Markovitz. We touched on many topics, including his upbringing in Boston, what he practices to stay sharp, important things for being a versatile musician, and much more. You can find Raviv on his website at ravivmarkovitz.com and also on Instagram at Raviv Markovitz. And so without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Raviv Markovitz. All right, guys, I'm here with Raviv Markovitz. How are you, man?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to join the podcast family. So
yeah, man, it's become like quite the cohort of guests, and hopefully you know, like onward and upward.
That's for sure. It seems like it's heading there. So
yeah, man. So it's good times. Let's talk a little bit about what you've been up to recently.
Sure.
Obviously playing a lot. I see your name everywhere pretty much. And so tell us how you got to where you are.
Okay, no problem. So I can start from the beginning.
Sure.
I'm from Boston originally, about half an hour outside the city. And I grew up in a pretty, my dad is not a professional musician, but he grew up playing pretty consistently for fun over the years. And he actually, there was a legendary piano teacher in Boston named Charlie Benakis, who people might be familiar with, who he kind of like took lessons for years. Like, so I was kind of like going to his lessons and just we played together, and he wanted I guess he wanted someone to play with. He played piano. So, he got me started on the bass. I guess I started on piano originally, and then switched to bass, and that was kind of the beginning. And it just was always a big part of my life growing up. You know, when I got into high school, my high school had a pretty strong music program. Actually, a good friend of mine, Stephen Feifke, they're literally like preschool pictures of us, which is pretty hilarious. Yeah. So there were other people who were equally serious. And when I got to high school, everything kind of just, kept happening, and it was who my friends were, and it was what I love to do. So that's kind of where the beginnings were.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Shout out to Stephen Feifke. He's coming on Thursday, which would be a blast.
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he's just getting back from Japan, so we'll be battling, the jet lag and all that. But
for sure.
Yeah, it'll be good. And I think by the time people are listening to this, that conversation will have already happened. So I guess by the time people are listening to this, expect Stephen's podcast to come out soon.
There you go.
So yeah, man. So was your family always into music? Were they musicians at all?
Sure. So I mentioned my dad played, like, he grew up playing saxophone, clarinet, and he kind of started playing jazz piano pretty consistently. He's a family doctor, but he was working in Boston, and he took classes at NEC. So he was pretty involved. My mom is not a musician, but was very supportive. But it was really my dad who, I think, I started on piano again, like I said, but, he saw these bass players, and A, there weren't so many bass players, and B, at the time, if you play three notes, you can play bass line, and C, he wanted someone to help him practice and play together. So it was really him in the house that we started playing together, and Steven used to come over from an early age, and we had another kind of group of friends who was into it pretty from an early age, and I remember in high school, every day, like, we'd hang out, check out records after school, and it was just kind of became a big part of my life pretty early on. So, yeah.
So you were living, kind of growing up and living kind of in the Boston area. What was the Boston scene at the time like? Like, what kind of music or people did you get a chance to see play, and who were some of your biggest mentors and influences during that time?
Totally. So the Boston scene is pretty vibrant, I think, maybe even more so when I was living there. But there were always amazing concerts at the Regatta Bar and Scholars, which were like, anytime anyone from Christian McBride to Ron Carter to the Yellow Jackets to Joshua Redman. I mean, the best of the best were coming through there. So that was an amazing thing that we had access to. And then I guess that's one component. The other component is my high school brought in guest artists every year. So there were some really phenomenal people who came to work with us. There's a great pianist, Makoto Ozone, who I know is one of Steven's like early influences. And he came, and we just had amazing resources, I think, at our high school in terms of just people who were around and people who came and did workshops. And then, let's see. So then there was this legendary piano teacher in Boston named Charlie Banakis, who he was teaching there for forever, and he just taught everyone. Michael Brecker came to him for lessons. People at Berganzi was heavily involved with him, and I took lessons from him for about a year. And that kind of just changed the way that I thought about music and the way that I approached everything. And there was I should mention a bass teacher named Bruce Gertz, who was a Berkeley faculty member who I also studied with for many years. So it's kind of like, Boston's kind of like a small New York in a way. Like it was like a sheltered, not a sheltered New York in a negative, but a sheltered New York in a way that you still have access to where, Garzone is in Boston. I mean, there's this great people who've lived in Boston forever, who just hang out there. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is definitely a great scene in Boston, very rich history, and I would say it's probably, maybe a little bit underrated, honestly. I don't hear people talk about it a lot, but I mean, Berganzi's there, like you said, Garzone is there, Bruce is there, who's a great bass player, and just a lot of people.
The other thing also is that there's obviously the college community there, Berkeley and NEC, and there's MSM Prep for high school kids. There's NEC Prep, and that's a program that I went to like once or twice a week all through high school, and I met some amazing, that was like the first people I played with outside of my high school were NEC Prep. And I remember my first combo, it was Grace Kelly, Jake Sherman, who is now living in New York, and a great drummer named Dan Nadeau, and that was just kind of like the first people I played with not in my high school were these people who are now really doing great things, and it opened my ears in a new way. And they'd be like, tonight there's a Dave Holland masterclass at NEC, so come, hang, and opportunities like that I try to take advantage of. So it was happening. I like Boston. I'm pro Boston, I like Boston. So.
Yeah, man. And of course, there's all the advantages of being able to be around a fairly big city, and there's just certain advantages that come along with that. There's bound to be a bigger scene, and people who are doing tours like a Dave Holland or Josh Raviv or other folks like that. They're much more likely to come through to Boston than to some random town. So yeah, that's
totally.
It's definitely
and also sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, it's definitely something you want to take advantage of. That's
for sure. And also, I had family in New York, and it's not like any, Boston, New York is not like the easiest, but I would come to New York and hear shows, and you feel like you have access to the best, and I guess that's something that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise. So, yeah.
Yeah, man. So let's fast forward a little bit. After high school, what is the next thing?
That's a good question. So after high school, I guess I'll preface it by saying that I had maybe slightly less of a traditional path. I don't know what. These days I don't even know what a traditional path even means. Right. I don't think there's such a thing. But the conclusion is that I went to Columbia in New York, and at the time, I guess I didn't really know. This is maybe for anyone thinking about, what the next move is. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know if I wanted a conservatory, strictly conservatory experience. And I applied to a lot of double degree programs which exist. For example, Tufts and NEC have a partnership. And then when Columbia became an option, I figured it'd be a good chance to get a good academic degree and be in New York. And so I moved to New York and went to school. That's what's next. And yeah, I definitely thought about conservatory. I had the opportunity to go to conservatory, and then that's what happened. And yeah, that was my next move.
Did you ever did you end up finishing the dual degree with Columbia? And then is it kind of like is Columbia the school that has a thing with Juilliard? Is that
You're right.
Is that the correct
totally
matchup?
So when I was doing it, it wasn't. I don't know if it was a jazz thing yet. I just did Columbia, so I wasn't involved with Juilliard on an official basis. I'm trying to think who the first, maybe like Marty Jeff. I don't know. A few people after me did the dual program, but I just moved to Columbia. I was kind of like a, political science class in the morning, jazz club at night kind of deal. So
Gotcha. Was political science, was that your major?
So I was political science, and I did the pre-med requirements actually as well. So, but it's funny looking back. Like I think my first, probably all of college, I think I was at MSM or Juilliard or the New School probably like 4 to 5 times a week for sessions. So it ended up, I didn't get the conservatory. I wasn't in ear training class, but I was. I felt like I was still amongst all of the, I didn't even like swipe in. I just walked in with my bass, like to the. So I don't know. It was one way to do it. So yeah.
Yeah, man. Were you also shedding a lot at the time?
Yeah. So I was practicing a lot when I first got to New York. Trying to remember. Yeah, when I first got, I was practicing pretty much any time that I had, I guess in high school I was lucky to meet some people that through various high school programs that ended up moving to New York at the same time as me, obviously, and that was like my first network. So even though I wasn't at a conservatory and I wasn't in class with like 15 other musicians, they were still people who I just spent like a week with in LA or done a summer workshop with. And so I guess I was lucky in a sense that when I came to New York, I had some sort of network in that way.
Yeah, man, that's always a very positive and helpful thing to, to have some connections there before you got over there. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Still many of my best friends that I met in high school, as inevitably it goes. So,
yeah, man. So you finish school, and obviously you, I'm guessing, remain in New York because I don't know, New York. We were talking a little bit about New York before we started the show, and New York is an interesting place, man. It's a wild place, and one of my friends compares it to crack cocaine, just because there's just so much happening on such a high level at all times, at all hours. Totally.
And I think it's like, if we're talking about music, you can hear 10 of the best, saxophonists in the world on one night. If you're talking about whatever, Thai restaurants, you can have 10, it's like at 2 a.m, you can have 10 options. I mean, it is overload. Like it's, you feel it. And, I love the energy of the city, but I'm also aware of the thing that people, it's not for everyone. It's maybe not for me, but for the rest of my life. And it's a hard place to live for anyone, musician, it's just it's an overstimulating place, a hard place financially.
Yeah. And it's really like people say, you don't live in New York, you survive in New York.
For sure. That's for sure. And I have family outside of New York, like in the suburbs, and I have to go out there to like breathe air and go home. And but yeah, I think after college I wasn't ready to leave. I mean, I'm still not ready to leave, but I wanted to stay, and I wanted to stay. I wanted to stay at that point. So yeah.
Were you already gigging a fair bit and working, by the time that you graduated?
Yeah, so I was playing a fair amount in college. At that point I was saying yes to every gig that existed that I got asked for. any session that I got asked for. So I was ended up playing in college maybe 4 or 5 nights a week a lot of the time. Pretty much if I didn't have like a huge test in school or like a paper due like the same day, I would say yes. So it got to the point kind of when I finished college that I kind of, I'd always get asked to do something. And I remember in college, like no one in Columbia had any idea that I like played music. I mean, sorry, that's not true. I was involved in the music program, but no academic classes knew that I played music. And I remember, and vice versa, musicians didn't really know, I was kind of in 2 separate worlds. So there were definitely some memories that I have. Like I got asked to go to Europe in senior year of high school, and like I just remember I wanted to go so badly, and I ended up going. But I remember like talking to so many teachers. Like I was like, listen, like explain to them like what it was, and then going back to me like I can fly out this time and this, and like it was so much coordination and logistics, and I felt like that in college too. That I think after college I just wanted to like exist as a musician and be like, yes, I'm free. Like I don't have to check my test schedule for next semester. Like, I'm free. Like, like I can do this gig. So, I don't know if I was planning so far ahead, but I was just like, I want to exist in New York and experience that life. And I was lucky that I was playing a fair amount that I was able to just kind of like keep doing what I was doing. So yeah.
Yeah, it's something that I hear all the time, from musicians in their early stages of their career, and they just basically say, yep, I said yes to everything. If someone asked me, I said yes. And
totally.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, what does that look like? So give us like an average week or month, when you were in college and then the first little bit out of college, like what types of gigs were you saying yes to?
Right. That's a really interesting question. That's a really interesting question.
Like, was it a lot of weddings? Was it like restaurants? Was it
I think,
salsa bands? Like, paint a picture for us.
So I guess I should like preface that by saying that I guess as I continued to play and play more, like as long as I was playing with great musicians who I really enjoyed playing with, that would be like the minimum. So, and I'm trying to remember. Like, I feel like the people that I was getting to play with were people that I really enjoyed playing with. So it wasn't like I was like going to 4 hours on a train playing for I don't know. It wasn't like I was playing like musically unfulfilling gigs. So mostly. So I think even if it was like a private event or a restaurant gig, it was still with people that I really enjoyed playing with. But I played all sorts of gigs, like restaurants, private events. I remember going to Brooklyn, and if you live in Manhattan, going to Brooklyn is like another universe. Pretty much like with a friend, like I think we were on the train for like 2 hours for a gig that paid no money, and it was pouring rain. It was like pouring rain. And I came back and like I was happy to do it. Like I was just happy to be playing and meeting new people. And I still am. I still am happy to be playing, obviously. But yeah, anything. So I guess when I was in college, it was less about like money, and because I was in college. And then when I finished, it was like, okay, now I have to like really support myself, which I did in college to some extent as well. But it was, there's no, I'm a college student. It was like, I'm a grown up. So yeah, I played at that time, the Emerging Artist series was a big thing at the Bar Next Door, which was kind of like a free hour set. And the Bar Next Door still is kind of like one of the places to play. And I played that so many times. I can't even count, like dinner and tips. And I was happy to do it, with good friends. And yeah, so.
Yeah, so this might be a tough question, but if you had to fill in the gaps between graduating college and now, tell us about that time if you could manage it.
It's a good question. Let's see, from finishing college into now. So I did go back to school and finish the pre-med portion, which I mentioned. But in terms of the rest of the situation, I've been playing pretty consistently in New York, which has been something that I always am thankful for and enjoy. Getting to travel, and I've done a fair amount of recording. I'm trying to, these are bad answers. No, I've been traveling some, and you know what? Let me start over. I don't know. Let me start over. After college, I moved into an apartment. That's a good place to start.
Yes.
With my good friend Benny Beneco. I think he was on the show.
He was the first episode.
Was he the first episode?
Yeah, inaugural.
Gotcha. He's a good choice for the inaugural episode. That's for sure. So I moved in with Benny, and that was right after college. And at that point was when kind of like Dizzy's, the late night kind of started. That was the first time kind of when musicians our age were playing there. So that was like a big hang that came out of the blue, and living with, and I just started to live kind of the life of a musician. And yeah, like I said, I got a chance to travel around, play pretty consistently in New York, and I learned that I could like, I just experienced the life, and kind of saw what it looked like on a day-to-day basis. And I've gotten to travel a fair amount and record a fair amount, and just keep playing with kind of my friends and meet new people on the way. And I've just kind of seen, I guess, how meeting, saying yes to one thing leads to something that you could never believe. So, not that I've said yes blindly, but when I have said yes and I've met someone new, or someone comes up to you and then that turns into something, it's just the world where anything can kind of happen. And a lot of the relationships that I formed and stuff have come directly from, oh yeah, I met you in this random, like a band that I used to play in, Roy Stoff, who was a great pianist. He had a trio with Jake Goldbest on drums. I don't know Jake.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure, like I hadn't seen Roy in like 3 years, and I think he messaged me like on Facebook, and I was like, I'm crazy this person this was like, this must have been 2014 or 15. And we played once on a big band gig in Brooklyn. That was it. And like, I would never have thought if anything would come. And we ended up recording, and we traveled a lot. And that's like one of my fondest and most like, a band that I really am proud and happy to have been a part of. So I guess that's something that I've learned, but I've kind of just been taking one day at a time and going one foot in front of the other. So.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about your practicing. What does that look like? Are there any, it's probably obviously different from day to day, but are there any kind of general things that you always do, or any kind of, areas that you try to always cover when you're practicing? Can you just tell us a little bit about what that looks like for you?
Totally. So I think the first thing is that bass is a really physical instrument, a really hard instrument. All instruments are hard, but bass is one of the hardest, I think. I mean, just to play a note requires so much physical effort. And so I think for me, there's a fair amount of maintenance in terms of like scales and, playing things across the bass in different ways. So that's one core component. I think another core component is just a practical thing of learning whatever music. If you have recording coming up, if you have, any sort of tour or anything, learning that music. 3, I think, learning tunes, and which is a big component of what I do. And I still love to play along with records, and that kind of goes hand in hand with like some metronome type exercises that I like to do. So those, I guess, are some key components. Of my practice routine. I guess.
What is a tune that you learned recently, and what is a tune or a few tunes that you love very dearly and you wish people would play more?
Wow. That's a hard question. Oof. Let me think about that. I don't have a good answer for that.
All right,
let me think about that.
Yeah, man. We'll let you get back to us.
I'll come back to you at the end of the episode.
Sounds good to me. Yeah, it's always a hard one, but I like to throw it out there because I like to. I want to put pressure on the community to play some killing tunes that don't get played enough.
That's for sure. That's for sure. Yeah, I'll get back to you on that for sure.
Sounds good, man.
I'll think about it.
I'll follow up. So if there's obviously a lot of younger musicians that watch the show. I polled my Instagram audience yesterday, and it was like 94% musicians or something like that, which is hilarious. I don't know. That's pretty wild to me, just to have so many musicians in one place, watching what you're doing. And so if let's say someone who's in high school or college comes up to you and they're just like, hey Raviv, like, how do I do what you're doing right now? What are the most important things that I need to do or know in order to have a chance at doing the same kind of thing that you're doing?
That's a really good question. I think there are, firstly, just a key, like a baseline level of facility and proficiency on an instrument. Like that's like one. And I think it's clear that, especially when you want to come to New York or any city, major city, there's a lot of people who are excellent at their instruments. So, I was, however many bass players there are in a certain city, now there are that times, that's the whatever power. So I think the other advice that I would have, something that I'll still try and do, is like always be on time, always be early, always be prepared. I've been in a lot of situations where I've observed the band leader under a lot of stress, under a lot of, there's a lot of moving parts, and I always tried to just be as easy as I could and not cause, be as easy as I could, be on time, be prepared, so they don't have to worry about me. And I think 3 is like everyone wants to play crazy stuff, and everyone wants to transcribe a new whatever Chris Potter lick, which is great. But I always was really, it's a bass player, but any musician, just focused on making the music feel as good as I could. And people remember that. Like, people remember how the music felt. Like, they don't remember if you missed a note in the melody. They don't remember if you flubbed a note in your solo. It's like, was that like swinging, or was this groove, and was it on the pocket? So that was something that from like always I remember being, and I still am like conscious of, like, is this feeling good? If it's not feeling good, is it my doing? Is it, what's off here? And constantly being reevaluating. So I guess those are some things that I've tried to like take on in the process. And it's really true how like the people that I still play with are like really my close friends, and the relationships that I've developed and that I value like off the bandstand. So when I see people, it's still like, if you see people in jazz, you don't see them for 6 months, and you see them straight for a week. Like, that's just kind of how it goes. So,
Yeah, man. And I think the truth is that, relationships, building your network, and just going back to like the audience component, like the audience doesn't know if you're making the changes. Let's face it, like unless you're at Smalls and the audience is 78% musicians, they're not going to know if you're, maybe they can have some sense, but they're not going to be able to tell what you're doing, like on a very like specific, like melodic or harmonic level, but they can tell if you sound good. They can tell if it feels good.
Right.
And so those 2 things have always been primary for me anyway.
Another thing I think is like jazz jazz isn't like a 9-to-5 where you do your job and you come back and then you do it the next day. You're kind of always thrown into like new situations, and you're always like, you feel like, I don't know, people are watching you and you're being kind of evaluated. I think that turns people off, and it's not everyone's personality that they love to be like evaluated and put on the spot. And I think one thing that I try to take away is like, just like on to the next kind of, like I play a gig, it was great, it wasn't great, it was whatever, like think about it, like on to the next. And I remember like getting really hung up on like, oh no, like this happened, and like, I don't know, like I messed up here, and like now this person said that, like, there's a lot of like mental battles you can get yourself into. So I always now consciously try to be like, okay, like it's a new day, like next, like but you hear that in sports, and you hear that in football, you hear that in baseball, kind of like that. And,
yeah, man, I like to say that jazz is my favorite sport.
Yeah, totally, totally true.
Yeah, I remember like Ernie Watts saying in a masterclass one time, he's just like, playing jazz is kind of like continually preparing for the Olympics. And I kind of like that. It seems like that's true.
It's really true. Yeah, it's it's like between the physicality and the mental preparation and the whole thing. It's like, it's definitely not to be taken lightly. So good to put it in perspective. Sometimes it's just, in the end, it's just music. So.
Yes, it is not open heart surgery. No one is going to die if you can't play Cherokee in 12 keys. Exactly. I promise.
Exactly. That's for sure. Not to practice. Anyone listening has been out to practice Cherokee in all 12 keys. But yes, if you forget to change, the world goes on. Everyone will wake up. No one will be rushed to the hospital. So,
it does. So take it seriously, but not so seriously.
Totally. That's for sure.
That's something that, that keeps coming up over and over and over again. People tell me, like, don't take it too seriously, and I agree with that. So let's talk a little bit about what you've been up to recently, because you mentioned before we started the show that you recently recorded your first record as a leader, which is super exciting, because up until this point, I've been doing sideman thing primarily, doing all sorts of different projects with people, and it's a great thing, but at the end of the day, you're playing other people's music, and now you get to play your own. So tell us what that's been like for you.
Totally. So it was kind of a spur of the moment thing. I wasn't someone who was like, age 28, record one, age 30, like, it wasn't like that. It was kind of like, I've gotten to play a lot, I've gotten to travel, I've gotten to record on other people's stuff. Like, maybe it's time to do my own thing. And so I booked a date, and I didn't really have very much music ahead, prepared. So I spent the last few months writing and arranging tunes, and I gathered a group of some of my closest friends, which just always makes things easier. Jimmy McBride on drums, Stephen Feifke on piano, and Eldar, the pianist, plays on 2 tracks. Chad Lefkowitz-Brown, Benny Benak, and Ben Yinsen plays guitar on 1 track. So they're all so great and like easy to work with. So that made it really seamless. Like, we had 1 rehearsal, which I think was like 2 hours, and which is totally fine. Like, I brought bagels. I'm pretty sure we had bagels for like 40 minutes of those 2 hours.
Nice.
Which is fun. But yeah, it went really great. It's definitely not something I'm used to, being on like giving suggestions and instructions. But I think it came out really great. I'm really happy with how it came out, and now it's on to the next step. So we recorded a beautiful ballad. I know you asked me earlier about tunes. I just remembered a tune that I did learn recently, and I would love to learn everyone to play. It's called Detour Ahead. It's one of my favorite ballads, and I think you asked me earlier about some tunes, so that's when it comes from that.
Yeah, who wrote that one?
Oof, putting me on the spot. I'm not sure, actually.
Someone will fact check us.
Exactly.
Someone in the comments will someone knows.
Sure. Yeah. Totally. I don't know. I can check quickly.
No, that's okay.
But yeah, it came out great. And okay. But yeah, so it's been a great process and an ongoing one that requires a lot of work, but positive work. So yeah.
Definitely, man. And so people can expect that spring of next year. Is that correct?
Correct. If all things goes as planned, it should be out in the spring. So everyone keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, man. Are you putting it out yourself, or is it on a label?
It's not on a label, I don't think, but it could change. But will probably put it on myself, the first one. Yeah, it's been a process. Recording is just the beginning. Like the recording there, I'm actually tonight. I'm going to do some more mixing. So, but it's a good process. And it's amazing to hear we had 1 rehearsal. We walked out. I was like, yeah, we'll see what happens, and then it just comes to life in a crazy way.
Yeah, man. I mean, with a cast of characters such as the one that you named, I think your music is probably in good hands. Probably,
Totally. I trust those guys with anything. So yeah, those guys are awesome. So I'm glad I could get them on one road at the same time. So
Absolutely,
Yeah,
man. We're all looking forward to it. And where is the
appreciate
best
it.
place to keep up with what you're doing? You have your Instagram page. Is that just Raviv
Instagram,
Markovitz?
yes, that's just Raviv Markovitz. Facebook is always good. My website, which I will update, and yeah, I think probably Instagram, Facebook are the best.
Awesome, man. Hey, this is great. My final question is there any particular thoughts or advice or wisdom you want to put into the universe? No pressure, but consider that this podcast will be on the internet in perpetuity.
Yeah, I just think everyone, music is a great community of people. Music leads to awesome opportunities and allows you to develop amazing relationships with people, which is maybe one of my favorite, if not favorite parts of it. And yeah, everyone, a lot of people are saying you should do this, you should do this. Everyone in the end is doing their thing and living life. So live life. That's my best. That's my best thing. Don't be afraid to, take left turns and right turns, and do what suits you. So that's my best advice.
I love it. Thank you very much, man. Hey, this is super
thanks,
fun, and I really enjoyed
it.
this one. I think it's going to be really super valuable for the audience. So stay on the line for 1 second, and thank you so much for coming on.
All right, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for checking out the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you happen to be listening to this. And if you enjoyed the podcast, consider giving it a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. For more episodes, please visit BerniesBootlegs.com. Thanks again, and see you guys next time.